Szanowni Państwo, myślę, że możemy zaczynać. Ja się nazywam Piotr Stronkowski. Miał przyjemność moderować z szanownymi gośćmi. Na co dzień pracuję w European Training Foundation. To jest agencja Komisji Europejskiej zajmująca się kwestią kompetencji, rynkiem pracy w krajach sąsiadujących z Unią Europejską, ale przez wiele lat w Polsce w obszarze Europejskiego Funduszu Społecznego i w Ministerstwie Rozwoju i też realizując szereg badań i ewaluacji. Chciałbym zacząć od zaproszenia szanownych gości do naszych panelistów do zajęcia miejsc i poproszę na początek do zajęcia miejsca panią Adrianę Sukową. Pani Adriana jest zastępcą dyrektora generalnego DG Employment i nadzoruje wszystkie fundusze w DG Employment, w tym najważniejszy fundusz, Europejski Fundusz Społeczny. W kolejnej kolejności zapraszam Piotra Krasuckiego.
Moving on to Piotr Krasuski,
dyrektor Departamentu Zarządzania EFS, który od ponad 20 lat zajmuje się Europejskim Funduszem Społecznym, funduszem też Krajowym Programem Odbudowy i szeregiem innych inicjatyw. Kolejnym gościem jest pani Anna Mlost.
Okay, we have Anna Mlost.
Dyrektor Departamentu Rozwoju Regionu w Urzędzie Marszałkowskim Województwa Małopolskiego. Zajmuje się też
Regional Województip Office.
Województwa, zajmuje się polityką spójności.
Years of experience in Cohesion Policy.
Środkami europejskimi w Urzędzie Marszałkowskim.
European Fund Management within this office. Moving on to Mr. Benedict Wouters.
Benedyk jest dyrektorem Wydziału Programów Europejskich
European Funds Department
w flamskim Ministerstwie Pracy i Ekonomii Społecznej.
Ministry of Labour and Social Economy.
W organizacjach międzynarodowych, pracował też w Komisji Europejskiej, zajmuje się też zarządzaniem przez rezultaty. I ostatni nasz gość, Kuba Wygnański, prezes Zarządu Pracowni Badań i Innowacji Społecznych. Od szeregu lat zajmuje się wsparciem, rozwojem sektora pozarządowego w Polsce. Można powiedzieć, że guru sektora pozarządowego. Kwestia techniczna, panel dzisiejszy jest w języku polskim, ale też mamy panelistów, którzy mówią w języku angielskim. Przypomnę, że ci z Państwa, którzy potrzebują tłumaczenia, proszę Państwa, żeby udać się po zestawie do tłumaczenia.
Also you in the audience, if you'd like to have interpretation, please pick up your receivers in front of the room. And now we're going to see
społeczny wymiar polityki spójności i jej transformacja. Dzięki Europejskiemu Funduszowi Społecznemu w ciągu ostatnich 20 lat zwiększyła się spójność polskich regionów. To efekt zainwestowania 25,5 miliarda euro, z którego skorzystało ponad 25 milionów Polek i Polaków. Zmiana jest zauważalna w każdej dziedzinie życia społecznego. Bez tych inwestycji rozwój polskich regionów byłby znacznie wolniejszy. Przykładowo, różnice pomiędzy województwami w sytuacji osób młodych na rynku pracy zmniejszają się obecnie o 10% rocznie. Dzięki EFS różnice pomiędzy regionami mają szansę zmniejszyć się o połowę w przeciągu niecałych 7 lat. Bez Europejskiego Funduszu Społecznego różnice malałyby do tego samego poziomu przez 13 lat. Konwergencja dotyczy całej Europy. Inwestowanie w jakość zatrudnienia, edukację, redukcję ubóstwa przynosi rezultaty. Europejski Fundusz Społeczny pozwala budować potencjał liderów rozwoju, jednocześnie wzmacniając regiony, które tego potrzebują. Dziś przed zjednoczoną Europą stają nowe wyzwania. Rozwój sztucznej inteligencji, nasilające się migracje, zmiany demograficzne wymagają od wspólnoty adekwatnych reakcji. Aby sprostać tym wyzwaniom, potrzebny jest silny Europejski Fundusz Społeczny, który łagodzi negatywne skutki zmian społecznych, wspiera reformy i zdolności adaptacyjne polityk publicznych. Dlatego już dziś musimy zadać sobie pytanie, Jak w przyszłości powinien wyglądać Europejski Fundusz Społeczny, by w jak najpełniejszym stopniu odpowiadać na współczesne i przyszłe wyzwania?
Dziękuję bardzo. Poproszę o krótką prezentację na wprowadzenie. Chciałem powiedzieć na początku, nim przejdziemy do pytań skierowanych do panelistów, kilka słów na temat społecznego wymiaru polityki spójności. Słyszeliśmy się wiele razy wypowiedzi o tym, jakim sukcesem są ostatnie lata w polskim rozwoju. I faktycznie jak spojrzymy, mam tutaj taki jeden slajd, który pokazuje, jak zmienił się PKB w Polsce, PKB per capita w relacji do średniej unijnej, z uwzględnieniem siły nabywczej. Jak porównamy sytuację w 2004 roku, możemy zobaczyć, że Polska była w 2004 roku jednym z najbiedniejszych krajów Unii Europejskiej.
2004, Poland was one of the poorest European countries, and we were at about half of the EU
Odnotowaliśmy bardzo znaczący wzrost,
and we have gone up.
Spojrzymy na inne kraje, tu wybrałem kilka krajów, żebyśmy dla porównania. Czechy też odnotowały wzrost, chociaż miały sytuację wyjściową dużo lepszą.
We have Czechia, also an increase, but starting from a higher level.
Natomiast
in Romania, a lot of
tego przez wiele lat odnotowały
growth.
sukcesy w rozwoju polityki gospodarczej.
But when we look at some other countries, there are those that have been stagnating. For example, in Italy, vis-a-vis the EU average, their GDP per capita has gone down at PPP.
Wzrost gospodarczy, taki sukces gospodarczy nie jest
which shows that
dużo tutaj zależy
economic success is not a given.
Od tego, jak sobie
a lot
definiujemy
depends on public policies and how it is defined.
Wzrost gospodarczy jest tylko jednym z elementów, bardziej syntetycznym wskaźnikiem rozwoju gospodarczego i społecznego.
Only one of indicators of social economic growth or improvement.
Jak spojrzymy na sferę społeczną, ja tu wybrałem
we look at the social sphere,
też wydaje mi się dosyć istotne, wskaźnik zatrudnienia i stopę bezrobocia. Znowu jak porównamy sytuację w Polsce w 2004 roku i dzisiaj, to widzimy, że ta sytuacja zmieniła się diametralnie. W 2004 roku wskaźnik zatrudnienia w Polsce był jeden z najniższych w Unii Europejskiej, dzisiaj już znacznie przewyższa średnią europejską. Stopa bezrobocia była dwa razy wyższa niż średnia unijna. Myśmy się utrzymali z dużymi problemami na rynku pracy. Dzisiaj to stopa bezrobocia jest o połowę mniejsza niż średnia unijna. Też z tym związana jest spadek stopy ubóstwa, znaczący spadek stopy ubóstwa i poprawienie się dobrobytu ludności. Wiemy też, że mamy badania, które pokazują, że polityka spójności znacząco przyczyniła się do tej poprawy. Dzięki ostatnich wyliczeń zrealizowanych dla ministerstwa
recent study for the Polish ministry, we have increased,
tej interwencji nie było. I co ważniejsze,
the employment rate is higher. GDP is 2 percentage points higher thanks to the social policy.
Ze stopą bezrobocia. Te wskaźniki oczywiście nie
all those indicators do not measure everything, but they are indicative of what is going on, and it shows a considerable improvement in the situation in Poland and in other countries of Central Europe. I'm showing just some of the indicators because the list is much longer. There are some problems with migration, immigration, and also demographic problems. So there are several social issues.
Chociaż sytuacja się poprawia, to zróżnicowanie jest istotne.
A continuous considerable disparity between regions, the regional development, also in the competencies and the level of competencies in Poland. Recent studies have shown that some competencies such as digital ones and and some others, some more basic ones. In Poland, we are way behind. Quality of education, we've seen an improvement, but there is still room to improve, to further improve. There's also exclusion. People with defavored areas or people with disabilities, and the need to strengthen public administration. These are the kinds of problems that we are facing. So the question really is what kind of cohesion policies we should need to respond to these challenges better. And this is what we're going to talk about during this panel.
Panel zorganizowany w ten sposób, żeby był czas na pytania.
In this panel, we are going to have some time for questions, for answers, and also for the Q&A session.
Więc proszę zapamiętać,
so please
odnotować sobie w
pamięci. Remember what kind of questions pop up in your heads, and there will be time for you to ask them.
Skierowanymi do panelistów.
But I'll start with our panelists, starting with Mrs. Adriana Sukowa.
What are the main achievements of European Social Fund in supporting member states in addressing key social economic issues, problems, and what are key factors for success of European Social Fund?
Well, I tried in the very first session, the panel session, to show and also give some data about the results and achievements of cohesion policy in the area of social inclusion, addressing employment and skill shortages, going forward for improving education and so on. There are a lot of investments in all these areas where the European Social Fund has been really instrumental in all countries. You showed very clearly the results in very well progressing employment levels in Poland and very sharply reducing unemployment levels. So these are also accompanied by the efforts to provide active labor market policies in a very efficient and effective way, providing opportunities and easy access to upskilling and reskilling for people, sometimes through the companies who employ them, going forward with a number of countries who have identified improving the quality of education, even basic education, secondary education, through the support of the European Social Fund for upskilling and reskilling teachers, providing more equipment for improving education, but also making the profession of teachers more attractive. There are, and you know that last year we had the European Year of Skills, where a lot of attention was given to vocational education and training as one of the key elements of providing young people with chances for easy employment as soon as they finish their secondary education. And last but not least, addressing the social issues in the society, addressing those that are vulnerable, that need additional support in order to get access to the labor market or become fully integrated in society, and also reducing poverty. So all the social elements of the social fabric of a society can be supported to European Social Fund, and majority of member states have done this. They're continuing in the current programming period. There have been, I can say that in 2014-2020, there have been 7.2 million people who directly have benefited from support to find employment in Europe. More than 10 million people have received qualification, which really helped them find a better job and quality job. We had 15 million participants in social inclusion measures, and I have to underline the importance also of the Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived in the previous programming period, where we introduced support in daily survival, but it was always accompanied with additional measures for people to rethink their place in society, additional counseling on how to manage their life, and also help them reintegrate back in society. We have supported almost 7 million people from disadvantaged groups, which sometimes these can be women, young people, people with disabilities, migrants, and so on. And in the current state of the society and economy where we have important labor and skill shortages, we really have to cater for everybody who can be supported with more efforts or less efforts to join the labor market, to develop their skills, to develop their competencies, but also identify their interests, what they want to do. And we have seen this in many projects across Europe to when young people are really allowed to test different professions so that they decide which is the one that they want to do and help them to be to have access to this type of education that will help them quickly enter the labor market. But then job-to-job transitions inevitably happen because of the technological development at this high pace. And we have a lot of programs and projects supporting upskilling and reskilling, the transition between one job to another, the transition from education to the job market, but also the transition when it is linked to our major transformation, green and digital. And we are still quite far away at EU level, and also most countries are still lagging behind digital skills, which are becoming basic skills. So keeping the focus of ESF interventions on digital skills will be needed for sure. And I believe that having a reflection of what has worked so far, we have a lot of lessons learned, we have a lot of very good examples, but we also have to redirect in the future our thinking about how to comply and also meet the forecasted needs of the labor market. So I'll stop here now because I can talk a lot and I'm trying to discipline myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this intervention and so much focus on skills and the transition and support for people in the most disadvantaged or difficult situation. I think this is what it's about. On one hand, building the competitiveness, on the other hand, building the cohesion. Piotr Krasucki, pytanie do ciebie.
And now Piotr Krasucki, a question to Piotr Krasucki.
Na początku dzisiejszej konferencji wiele
we
słów o tym, jak
heard at the beginning of the conferences so many words about how successful Poland was. Now, from your point of view, from the point of view of the head of the ESF management department, what can you say about the challenges that are faced by Poland, such as the aging and digital economy, how ESF is helping meet those challenges, and what kind of successes there are? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and good day to you all. I think we can try to address this question in 3 dimensions. First and foremost, we've seen significant improvement in macroeconomic situation over the last 20 years. So we are enjoying a golden age, if you like, for economic development. Certainly, we can't and we won't ever be able to explain how much of this development is due to the European Social Fund and the cohesion policy at large. We can only provide certain estimates and hypotheses. But for sure, the success of the European Social Fund was possible thanks to positive economic developments. I think we would be much less happy if we spent the same amount we're talking about, which is 25 billion euro, if we invested them in adverse economic circumstances with poorly developing economies and high unemployment rate. Second thing, something that we like to boast about, large numbers juggling there and there, 25 billion, 25 million Poles, more than half of them received some kind of support from the European Social Fund. So historically speaking, the deeper we go, the more obvious the support was. When we first entered the EU, during the first 10 years of our membership, we were faced with high unemployment, almost 19% of unemployment rate, even 25% of unemployment among young people. So the role of the European Social Fund was quite obvious. We were there to keep the labour market going, to keep those jobs and maintain them and keep them up for the young people, especially for the newcomers. And then things started to change in the second decade, around 2017, because, well, 2017 was really a breakthrough year, because this is when more people left the labour market than entered it. This somehow was a prognostic of the changes. And then there came pandemic and the labour market bounced back. And so the European Social Fund is at the crossroad. It is not that easy to gain success with those large numbers. For the last 20 years, we trained some 4 million people. That is the number of the unemployed who received training in Poland for active job seeking. And for sure, we will never be able to repeat this success, not to mention that we don't need it anymore. When we were first polling and researching the fate or the life path of those people whom we trained, and we can do so with the database of the insured, for instance, we were able to check how these people are doing. So at the top end, we were able to have 60 up to 65% of efficiency. How do we define efficiency? Long-term employment. So this means that the person was able to keep that job for at least 12 months. I think what continues to be the biggest challenge is improvement in the quality of social services and state services, public services. There is this dichotomy, if you like, between the cohesion policy and the national recovery program. You like to say that the national recovery program is about structural reforms, while the social policy is more cohesive, if you like. Now, for the last 20 years, due to the fact that we were able to adopt this divide between the national and the regional levels, and we were always investing into better public policies at the national level, we can now say that we have achieved a lot of success there. Look at the social economy sector. Thanks to the fact that we are investing heavily there into individual elements, straight from 2024, we now have some 100 million jobs and over 40 billion zlotys in revenues generated from that sector. But mind you, this is not something that you can achieve over one financial perspective. No. Quite often, as public officials and you as people cooperating with us, complain that, well, we are not efficient enough. Well, if you look at it from the point of view of the long time span, say from 2004 up to 2024, this 20 years have brought significant structural change, thanks to various instruments, financial, legal instruments, thanks to the system to support public services, we were able to build a new public policy. Well, I don't have enough time to go through all the examples here, but for me, the largest challenge is for the European Social Fund to support reforms and to support better capacity building in the social policy. Thank you very much, and thank you for emphasizing this long-term approach, which is very important in social policy. Well, it's not about quick wins, although obviously quick wins are very much demanded by the politicians because they can use it to fuel their popularity. But for significant changes and for significant reforms, it's all about long-term, sometimes even a generational gap of 20 years. Let me remind our panelists, whom I need to discipline a little bit, that you all have 5 minutes allotted to your presentation, and I will be starting the clock very soon. A question to Jan Jakub Wygnański. You are looking at the European Social Fund from a different point of view, not from the point of view of the government administration, but from the NGO's point of view and social innovation. So, to what extent, in your view, has the European Social Fund become an instrument for learning, that is generating and testing and disseminating new approaches. Can you give us some examples of implementing social innovations that can be successful? Well, I knew you were going to ask that. Well, because for sure you gave me a heads up. So which clock is mine? Okay, here I go. Yes, I understand we have 100,000 social economy entities. Well, of course you can tell a different story. I come from the NGOs world, and I do have this long-term perspective. Downdove back in 1988 said that when you want to build a social society, you need to have 6 months for all the institutions, and then you have 6 years for the market, and another 60 years needs to be spent on building the community, the society at large. So I was here as invited as a hooligan, really, because I want to speak my mind, and I always do. I'm a sociologist by training, and I am really impressed by the big numbers. Okay, 25 billion euro. What do you want me to say? We will be spending some 180 million zlotys on the Polish army. And as for the GDP, whatever happened at the World Stock Exchange is so big that it actually costs the American Stock Exchange the amount that is an annual budget of Sweden. So, mind you, this is big number for sure, but that very much depends on your perspective. So the question is, what can we do to make sure that the system still works? What kind of safety net do we have? How can the European Union, which is often compared to an old aunt, how can this EU continue working? Well, Donald Trump is closing up on any kind of help and support. What happens to the Polish state after that's done? Well, many organizations that are, for instance, responsible for the integrity of the Polish election system, well, they may be faced with a very difficult choice. Can the EU be a fast actor, reacting really quickly and swiftly? Well, we're here for good and for bad, as Schmidt says. We need to be able to face up to these extraordinary situations. I'm quite worried that we may be abusing this opportunity. But the point is, how do we keep the right balance? I use with triads and trilogies and trilemmas. I'm very much interested in non-binary logistic problems, because I think one of the issues we're facing is about being too binary. We all know the saying that it's quite difficult to combine 3 things together. Something, say, to be fast, to be good, and to be cheap. Well, 2 of those characteristics can be met at once, but not 3 of them. So I'm all in favor of marrying the 3 elements together and trying to do away with the dichotomy, with the binary character. So what do we do with the regulations? Do we want to invest? Do we want to compete? Do we want to make sure that we arrive at a coherent solution? Well, the US would be the best example of what happens when we fail to do so. There are numerous situations where we simply have to be wiser than that. We are saying that Poland's success had to do with the fact that we are able to spend so much money fast. And Poland is really good in that. We're not losing papers, we're not losing files, the level of corruption is not excessive, and we are a great spender. We really know how to spend the money. Say, I come back home and I approach my wife and I said, look, honey, I spent it all, but I can provide slips for everything. Would my wife say, well done, you good husband? Is that really what we want to achieve? So the question arises, if you are participating in all the language courses possible, are you really spending the money in the right way? So we need to ask the question, fine, but so what? And there are many social situations which would require us to say, so what? We did have a presentation of the mayor of Krakow. It's great, he was showing us the new train and what have you, but the question is, so what? I mean, does it really stay with us? All the social issues are much more complicated than just spending and the theory of change. Even the European Social Fund, the name of of it. In Polish we say społeczny, in English it is called social. What does it really mean? Is it about evening out the changes? Is it about making sure that everybody gets the same amount? Oh, I don't have time. I only have 12 seconds. Anyway, the social capital and the capital of human resources, well, this is something we need to work on, because in terms of our children, yes, Poland is doing quite well, our kids are receiving quite solid education, but if you look at Polish adults, we are ranking very low in terms of whether we understand what we read. Poland has had fantastic history of supporting each other. Now, Rzeszów grew its population by 30% over the week, and you know exactly what I'm talking about after the war broke out behind our border. So we are great with this one-off actions, one-off campaigns, but are we also good in sustaining the support? Now, the Grand Schumann's project was a post-war project that was there to keep peace. We do not remember about it. So, anticipating further presentations when we are going to talk about new challenges, I'm sure we should focus not so much on the one-off support schemes, but about upkeeping what we already have. I can see Minister Jarosińska here in this room, so I'm glad to say that we managed to achieve certain political consensus. I'm glad that Brussels was able to help us out, and we were able to complete the project with the politicians never really making it more difficult than necessary. So my problem is maybe we can be too good in the way we use European Social Fund. Maybe we are overspending. Some of the requirements in the European Social Funds did have a number of requirements. The social assistance, social services, social economy. So the question is there life after European Social Fund? What happens when we spend all the money and we do it so nicely? What happens then? And so what? Because the actual test will be in the durability. The buildings will be there. What is going to stay in social terms?
Dziękuję, Kuba, bardzo za to.
Thank you, Kuba, for your presentation. It seems to me that this question that you have proposed, whether we are really able to create durable social change and whether our institutions are really well prepared to handle the change and to react to it adequately to the challenges as they appear, is really something that is very apt. And let me address similar question to Benedikt Weiters.
Yeah, exactly, because the discussion about European Social Fund should not only be about what we do, but also how we act. And using Flanders' example, can you point to examples of how the European Social Fund has had a positive impact on the way on institutions, on how institutions, particularly public institutions, operate? To what extent does the European Social Fund help to make public institutions more open to learning, to innovate, to react to critical situations, as mentioned by Kuba?
Yes, thanks a lot. Wow, 5 minutes to say something after all those speakers, because there's a lot of things that I just heard that I was thinking, what am I going to tell here, because Poland is so different from Flanders. But now I'm feeling like, well, maybe you can, well, it's interesting because where we are now is where I think you're also ending up already. So we don't have huge amounts of money. The time where I would say that we were successful with an industrial production model of results is over in Flanders. We have a labor market where the problem is not unemployment but shortage of labor. And still we have quite a few people that are inactive and there is a huge poverty dimension hidden typically behind that also. So the types of challenges that we are faced with have to do with things like quality of service that I heard about, and have to do with the fact that social issues are much more complicated than our old industrial production model of results makes us believe, where it's just how many trainings, how many pathways, how many this, how many that, does not really capture anymore the challenges that we face. And so we have a long tradition, I would say, probably well known by some people that have been around for a long time, like myself, in funding social innovation, in trying to use social innovation also for problems which in the past also for us were a little bit like, okay, let's do something there, it's in the margin, but we still want to score big on the mainstream operations, as we used to call it, but also let's put some money into social innovation for those hard problems so that we don't have to look at it too much ourselves from the public sector. We can leave it up to the NGOs, for example, rather than take also responsibility for that. And so we did that for a long time, and then at some point, and I think we really had a turning point with this programming period. So there's a real transition for us from the last one to this one. So for a long time, what we did is the typical open calls for proposals, come up with something innovative. We funded a little bit, as I used to say, well, apparently we can solve everything in 2 years with 200,000 euros. Typical type of project mindset. And then what happened were two things. Either nothing happened after the project, because the people from the project used to say, well, you know, we have this really fantastic thing, we experimented with it, and now we cannot get it done anywhere, because all the existing institutions have practices, rules, regulations, funding pipelines that basically don't allow for these things to happen. Okay, so that's not a very good way to use the money, I would say. Or the other ones that... Hello? Okay, the other... yeah, it's still working. So the other outcome, typical... Yes. The other outcome, no, it's switching on and off. Yeah. Okay, this one hopefully more stable. So what happened also was very ambitious social innovation projects, then gradually across the 2 years they had becoming quite mundane, because at least that was something that could then be integrated in existing organizations. So what we then discovered is that the problem was with all of these actors, because we have a rich field of NGOs, public sector. That's not the problem in Flanders. So we've been a quite rich region for a long time, so it's not a question of not having enough funding or enough resources there. It's more a question that we discovered of lack of innovation and learning capacity in all of these organizations. And I'm counting NGOs and public sector in that. And how did that happen? Well, sometimes I have to say, honestly, the funding pipelines beat the innovation capacity out of the organizations. So our industrial production model of results led to the fact that everybody switches off their brains and just does routine operations, because we can count a lot of them. We know how to do it. Nobody is wondering anymore if we're trying to solve anything with those kinds of operations. It's numbers, numbers, numbers. So we chose not to do that anymore in this programming period. So what are we going to do? I always wondered, why are we basically spending 10% of our money on social innovation projects with separate calls, while 90% of the money still goes to all sorts of organizations, NGOs and public service alike, but they're not really making any structural change or headway. So what to do about that? So basically we said, let's target deliberately these complex challenges, things that are never going to be solved. These are not problems where, oh, this problem, let's fund it away and then it's solved. These are things which require learning capacity, innovation capacity, adaptive capacity constantly. So this is something, these capacities have to be integrated and built into the operations of projects. Not something separate, done typically by very smart people, usually from some kind of staff department somewhere, or consultants who come up with something really nice, but nothing happens because there's no integration capacity. People cannot do anything with those types of innovation. So build innovation capacity as you are trying to work, and don't do it for projects for single actors, because most of these problems that still exist are not linked to just one sector or even one level. So we are targeting social inclusion issues that are multi-level. That means there's a part which is a responsibility of the Flemish government. Well, there's a part also the national government, but let's not start talking about that. Belgium is complicated. We still think, Flanders thinks it's a country. So it's multi-level. We have to involve multiple levels of government. They all have something to do there. They're all not cooperating with each other and working against or next to each other. The same with the NGO sectors. So everybody is, it seems almost like they're just trying to survive. We give a little bit of money to everybody, but we're not really working together to address the real issues that exist and that our citizens that are highly disadvantaged. We also have that in Flanders, don't worry. We are not really helping them enough. So we decided not to do that and move towards impact-oriented partner networks on the longer term. So we have now projects, if you still want to call it like that. I honestly don't like to use the word project anymore for that. This is structurally building the capacity of partner networks to be adaptive, to learn together, to innovate, and to do that with a longer term perspective. So we now have projects of 6 years rather than 2 years, where everybody after 2 years, well, honestly, after a year and a half, everybody stops already. It's half of a year trying to start up, a year doing something, and half a year stopping. And then we start the whole circus again. So that's not a very smart way of working for these kinds of issues where you really have to invest. We talked about investment. I like the word. Investment is a much nicer word than project. Projects are for buildings. Investments are basically in capacities. So I like to use that kind of work much more. I think I have to stop. But thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Benedict, and you will still have time next round to talk about it more. It's really interesting. Thank you very much for this. Wydaje mi się, że to jest niezwykle istotne, bo to jest dokładnie to, o czym też mówił Kuba.
It seems to me very important, as Kuba Wygnański was saying, how difficult it is to run projects, but also modify, change institutions. In order to use the funds to improve our institutions. Now, a question to Mrs. Anna Mlost about we stay in the area of successes in the ESF. Now, in this case, from the point of view of Małopolska, the region where we are, to what extent ESF has helped achieve certain or take certain opportunities, and what kind of successes you have? Thank you very much. And now let's begin by saying that just like in any other region, social matters are part of the Cohesion Policy and the building of the region's capital and taking care of families, which is our main objective. And the ability to use the ESF is immensely important, especially when the region has become a manager of this fund. We have always tried to strive to approach European funds as a flywheel, let's say. So the ESF has helped increase the intensity of existing activities. In some areas, the new funds have helped run some new initiatives that we hadn't done before, and also we had areas where we started ESF and other European funds are gradually moving on and are successful moving on into nationally funded area. We are spending 180 million euros in Małopolska, in the region, and this is really translated into 38 different activities with different topics, different target groups. Let me give you 3 examples: education, social services, and maternity and labor market. One of our strengths in the region, even though I'd say that the success that Piotr was talking about, Małopolska is quite a big beneficiary, because we normally come up with in statistics high, but education has always been our strength. But we always thought that education at the basic and at the high level, at the academia level, we were very high. And also at the basic level, but vocational education was wanting, and that was why we have used the ESF for this area. And we decided, once we got this fund and we got this opportunity, we channel these funds with a multifaceted vocational education support program, which was a partnership program with all kinds of vocational schools, so that their curricula improve. But we also involved higher education to use the potential in these entities to improve a vocational school level offer curricula better. And we also supplemented these packages with educational fairs, so expos, to show young people what kind of job offers are potentially out there in the region, showing to the young people, taking into account the labor market situation, and also supporting financially vocational education in the region. We have shown to young people that the vocational schools made sense to them, so that because they could then expect some good job offers, good opportunities in the labor market. Our vocational Małopolska a program that we did was the largest such project across Poland. So both vocational secondary education, almost all students took advantage of this in this area. Moving on to social services. We in Małopolska are relatively young in terms of age. We are the youngest in Poland, but we realized that we are also aging, and we are aging quite fast, even though they were still the youngest. So we started looking for solutions for senior citizens who are alone, to help them operate independently, and we started this project Teleanioł, the remote angel. We learned from other regions, specifically from Spain. We started some sort of remote support with a bracelet, a band, a live band that we call, that provide the senior citizens who are alone with a better sense of security and safety. We have been continuing with this project. It's a subsequent subsequent editions, and we have 8,000 people in each edition. And we in Małopolska, we are the expected lifespan is on average 2 years longer than average Poles, and with women is 10 years longer. And we have we are moving on to another area, that is the reproduction and the labor market. So young people with children, or vis-a-vis children versus children, young families, young moms typically leave the labor market for a number of years, which is not a very good situation for the region. And so we started a project called the European Nanny, which had 3 advantages: bringing back the parents to labor market faster, individual support for nanny support for children and financing. And this helped nannies, normally quite a lot of operating on the grey market, to move on into the formalized labor market. From our point of development priorities, we continue this even after the programming period. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I think that this is a kind of activity that responds to specific needs of specific people. In this case, of the local inhabitants in the Małopolska region. And often talking about the ESF, we use big words, social change. We sometimes forget that these specific actions that you were talking about do change people's lives, help provide better access to social services. So moving on, we started with successes, even though there was some criticism, which is a good thing always. But now I'd like to move on to the second section, to questions how to direct ESF in funding in future. Even though ESF is quite a large fund, it's not unlimited. So we need to define what kind of approach to take, do it strategically with some selected areas, or on the other hand, to cover as many areas of support as possible. So this is one of the dilemmas. Maybe to support competitiveness and so on. So let me start with Piotr Krasuski. So in Poland, ESF is a big instrument with providing the scope for many social groups, target groups. How do you view the Polish experience so far? Have we been supporting in a too narrow a scope or too wide? And the mechanisms arrangements that we have they worked? Have they not really quite worked? And what do we need to change, maybe? Indeed, the support was quite big. 25 million people who have benefited is a tangible proof. But because we were in quite a comfortable situation in every perspective, we in Poland were the largest beneficiary of the ESF across the union. So we'd like to count on continuing on that, so that we don't want to face the dilemma whether of choosing one area over another, because there is a limit. Now, in terms of the ESF targets or objectives, this is quite a broad scope, and it's hard to imagine what kind of areas could be included in the ESF scope that we still haven't got. Maybe we could think about residential, let's say, area, maybe apartments as a social service. This is something that the ESF could target potentially. And in Poland, we have a little bit specialized in providing accessibility for people with disabilities. And we'd like to use a little bit more the ESF in this area, even though, but we are facing some cross-financing rule, with a cross-financing rule that is limiting us a little bit. So we'd like to be able to use infrastructure for people with disabilities. I'm talking about the small scale here. Now, there is a problem, a recommendation I have for the ESF in terms of the structure of the objectives. There are too many of them. There are maybe too fragmented. The structure has a consequence, complications. It translates into IT systems and monitoring. And in the end, if you are proposing a project, you need to decide which objectives you want to target, A, B, C, D, K, or whatever. Even if you don't know what is under these projects, that We spoke in the outside the panels within NGOs. We think that the objectives should be fewer, larger, and they should be designed so that they can maybe permeate one another or overlap, because sometimes it's very hard to decide whether C and D in education, one is about quality and the other one is about accessibility. We'd like to have good quality with good accessibility. Another recommendation that we have is going back to administrative capacity building, which was there in the previous perspective, 1420, and is not available in this perspective. And our latest history has shown that, and I think one of the classics, probably Lenin, said that the institutions is the basics. So the legal, let's say, formal institutions are important. So in the cohesion report, for example, there is a map which overlays the cohesiveness index over the economic development, where there is poor development, for poor growth, institutions are poor. Where the institutions are poor, the economic development is poor. So we'd like to have more support in these areas. Now, talking about the various ring fencing, minimal thematic concentration, I'm against an approach of one fits all. Talking with Benedict here, it would be very hard to find solutions that would be would fit Belgium or Flanders and Poland and Małopolska region, for example. So we need concentration, definitely, but this should be a result of individual negotiations between a member state and the Commission. In the past, there were two perspectives. I think there was a rule where at least 60% of the ESF should be directed at some narrow number of target objectives, and it was a good solution. Poland would select its 5, and maybe Flanders would select its own 5. So concentration is important to reach critical mass, but on the other hand, we don't have this top-down approach that we all have to do exactly the same thing. Another thing important for the national level, a task for regional and national requirement or level, to coordinate ESF let's say objectives or activities with public policies. Now, if public policies are good, they are targeting services, ESF can help and gives excellent results. But if our institutions are weak and the instruments or policies are not very good, so no matter how much ESF we consume, results will not be good and not be durable. And finally, this dilemma that we have seen it many times in this panel, and Piotr, you were asking about it, to what extent ESF should be a tool for competitiveness and a driver for growth, and to what extent it should target people who are lagging behind this growth, or are maybe victims of growth. This is really a difficult question, and I don't have an answer. But the EU will have to face this question, and the Commission, together with the member states, will need to find an answer for this, because these are vectors that are often pointing in opposite directions. So let's work on along two vectors. This is a good answer, but if we do this, we cannot become an economic tiger thanks to the cohesion policies as a whole. So last year, yesterday's competitiveness compass report, and in the past the Draghi report show that it would be very hard to achieve the objectives that are posed by these two reports. Talking about cohesion policy is only for people with to defavored target groups. So this is really a difficult question, but we will have to answer this. Now, I think not only Lenin has been talking about institutions, but also the last year's Nobel Prize winner, Luto, who an eminent economist who spoke about the importance of institutions for economic development, and the competition between competitiveness and cohesion is an important question to ask. Now, it comes to my mind, I spoke with somebody who does a Center for Excellence for sports people, who is really highly competitive, is trying to promote competitiveness, but also want to be inclusive. And this person was telling me about what kind of dilemmas that they were facing. This is like in a nutshell, but supporting the most competitive sports people, we need to also think, we can think about inclusiveness and cohesion. Another question to Kuba Wygnański. We were talking about the dilemmas about the ESF, and from the NGOs' point of view, we often see those opinions that the ESF is too narrow. Piotr was saying that we have covered everything, but many NGOs are saying no. We cannot fit in those objective areas. So what do we do about it? To what extent the ESF should look for meeting certain objectives, and to what extent it should maybe offer a broader range of activities to tap into the potential of the NGOs, which is really very great.
Thank you for such an open-ended question.
Yes.
I see that the clock is working. Together with Piotr, we have been discussing and quarreling and arguing over various topics so far, for instance, the transportation-related poverty. Well, maybe indeed the fact that we have different options may really be the path for success, that you don't have to follow one path. Generally speaking, the organizations that were invented such a long time ago, before the European Social Fund was ever launched, do have certain courage to think about new developments. I understand that in the ESF you have forms to fill out and you have to stick to certain old types of structures, and really you need to be pretty opportunistic about the way you fill in those forms. You have to follow certain fashions and fads. The evolution never rewards those who are the bravest. It always rewards those who go with the flow. Well, there is this organization of isomorphization. You simply become what you eat. So I see a number of NGOs who follow a mono diet. Carbs, they simply feed on carbs. Look at me. But generally speaking, well, you may be laughing at that, but the problem is that there is nothing else. It would be great if we have more to choose from. Look at charity organizations in Poland. It is very powerful here. But in other countries, maybe so. In Poland, you spend 80 billion zlotys per year on getting booze, on buying alcohol. And apart from the great orchestra of Christmas charity, well, do we have any other organization that is able to do such a good work? So basically, it is a mono diet that we are following, not just carbs, perhaps, 3 other nutrients, but well, if you look at the 10% of your tax write-off, this is the most generous tax-related incentive, and it's still not working too well. I'm talking about this very famous tax relief of VAT for bakeries and other little shops that can actually use this tax relief if they give away the product at the end of the day. So there are various kinds of elements that don't really work. I'm talking about this 10% VAT tax relief. So we are not really doing very well on the experiment of the social economy. We have not been very successful here. So basically the organizations want to use a structure such as European Social Fund when they know the part, they've walked it on numerous occasions, and they know how reliable it is. So they either try to get the ESF or they go to other organizations that have been working according to those bureaucratic regulations. And there is a lot of checks that need to be done. And the NGOs are there to help them out, but they need to be given certain conditions to operate within this structural system. Now, the NGOs can be quite successful, but of course they are not the only ones to achieve success, because there are also citizens, people in the street. It was the Poles who opened their homes and hearts to the Ukrainians. That's why we had this miracle growth in the population of one of the Polish southern cities. So not only the NGOs, but basically the society at large. And this takes me to the governance. That's very important. Governance being one of the key issues. Governance is not about control, okay? We can check the bills and so on, but this is not about good governance. I've seen a number of organizations that have separate departments for cost eligibility. And you have ladies, because they are usually ladies, sitting there checking whether certain expenditure is eligible or not. And that's the only thing they do. Is it really the right way to spend money? Well, I'm not sure. I deal with social innovations in my professional life. That goes on to say that the Polish state realizes that this old-style Lenin commanding heights approach is simply not something that the Polish state can continue to pursue, because from the central level, the Polish state will not be able to manage all those little things that cannot be managed with this high command system. So we're looking at Flandria, we're looking at various other ecosystems that are doing a better job in managing it well. But generally speaking, the threshold of entry is really low in Poland. I mean, you don't have to have so much money in order to start a project. Say, you have a bright idea, but you need some money. In Poland, you have a lot of people who are quite resourceful, and they can tap the funding if it's made available to them. So people are resourceful, and we simply need to make sure that we are able to give them the right structure to make this idea happen. And the government should be brave enough to get out to the people and say, look, help us think about something resourceful, help us build something creative. And that takes me again to the social innovations. The ideas come to one box, to a single bag, and then we try to choose and pick those which are best. And in 6 months' time, we will be able to give them some amount of money. And we are giving a lot of money to a whole bag, but the point is, how do we choose and pick the right ones? Some of these projects would then be co-funded through the public funds with the ministry and so have you. We now have some 1,500 projects that are called innovative projects. Some 200 of those have already been validated. And you really need to think twice about the way you want to promote innovations, because we have a very conservative approach there. This is the approach that has been validated through the ministry. Only 1 out of 10 those innovations will then be scaled up. Not because they're no good, no, they are very nice and cool, but they cannot be repeated. So that somehow that innovation does not go hand in hand with replication, with repeatability. And maybe I'm spilling the beans a little, but we are not allowing people to collect all the invoices and get their money back, because this is not something that will help us validate the project, okay? So we are not refunding all the money that the project owners spent. For those years that we have worked with, we've never seen anybody taking the money and running away. No, people are delivering on the project. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not, but they have never been fraudulent. We haven't seen any frauds. People are not taking the money and running, okay? So I think we should be really offering more trust and confidence. I think that the Polish state, the government at large, should be giving away some of its power of checks and balances and trusting the people more. And I'm glad that we started talking about the innovations, and I'm also glad that we started talking about the new language, because we need to come up with a new linguistic regime. At the end of the war, churches said, look guys, we run out of money, we start to think because we have no money left. That's what Churchill once said. Well, I think we should start thinking even before money run out. When we discuss new developments, apart from innovations, well, we need to understand that innovation is not just nice to have. It won't be the nice to have thing forever. Innovations in our times is really something that we can call a life skill. Because these times are changing and we need to have this life skill. Like we're teaching our kids to swim, because this can be a lifesaver. Innovation can be a lifesaver, no longer a nice to have. And one more thing, because this may have a practical implication. During this programming period, for the first time round, we have special money of 0.25% that needs to be spent obligatorily on capacity building. For the first time, there is a special earmarked percentage. It's quite a lot of money in Poland. It's not that easy to spend, but capacity building in civic society is not that easy to be delivered upon. It doesn't go one way only, it goes both ways. So how do we turn a new key in an old lock, to use the metaphor? Can we do it? So do we need to offer a broader approach? So that is why we do have special earmarked amount for capacity building. And the nicest thing about it is that it can simply work as a new key in the old lock. You simply turn it backwards. I started talking about transportation poverty, about the fact that 14 million people in Poland have no access to public transportation. I'm mainly talking about those who live in rural population. So what do we do? Okay, the Polish state can invest in getting buses and coaches, but will many people use it? No, because many people have already bought some old diesel cars and they are burning this fuel and damaging natural environment. So what happens in those rural areas? There is this long and slow death of the Polish village. We have this heart of darkness happening there, really, with old people never leaving their houses because there is no way they can get to the nearest towns. And then you've got young people traveling around in their cars and being pissed off because there are no girls left in the village. They have no wives, no kids, because the girls have already taken to the town. And so they're driving their 30 years old vehicles that will not even take them to this town. So if something happens, if somebody takes those old diesel vehicles away but gives them new cars and tells them, but you need to provide social services to your neighbors, you need to use this car and drive your neighbor to the nearest doctor, maybe this is the right approach. Thank you, Kuba, for sharing that with us. Let me also say, again that we need to look for new formulas, for new ways, new approaches. Maybe we should be defining the space anew, collective intelligence. Maybe we should be looking for solutions that we can't even see now. Maybe we need to understand that some men are discriminated in the labor market. You have not heard it before, have you? But this is a problem that is visible. Certain rural areas, these men are pushed out. And they are now becoming carriers of radical movements, frustration, and even a threat to democracy. This is not something we can ignore. So a question is, how do we define the structures and formulas that are nice to look at on paper, but maybe we should go down to reality?
To what extent the approach used in Flanders to define the scope of intervention worked? Was it too broad in your assessment, according to you, or too narrow? And what should be changed?
Yes, thanks. Well, what a fantastic panel, honestly, Fred. Anyway, let's get back to some mundane things like scopes and how much concentration to have. Well, in Flanders we have a quite broad scope. And I think it's just the wrong question, honestly. So whether you would have concentration, which we comply with on a limited number of strategic objectives, okay, that's fine. But then still within that, you can go for hyper-fragmentation. So the real question is not how much money are you concentrating on which objectives and how many are those objectives. That to me is a bureaucratic response, probably the wrong one to the right question is how do you avoid fragmentation? So in the past, even with concentrated thematic objectives, we had thousands of projects and hundreds of calls, and you can hardly call that a very strategic approach. And so I see that a lot, very strange, because we keep getting asked to launch all sorts of competitive calls for proposals. The whole idea that this is a model that is good for addressing everything is, to my mind, a bit strange and counter to the idea of strategic. So strategic, what does that really mean? And you can think about it a little bit if you, like me, I've been everywhere. I've come from the private sector. I've been in consulting. I've been an auditor. I've done absolutely everything except politics, which I will never do. So... but you know, in the private sector, when somebody would say, well, you know, I don't really know what we should be doing. Let's have just some objectives and then launch some calls and then we see what comes in and we fund everything, would hardly be called strategic. Eh? So the whole question is how do we, you know, make sure that we are making strategic investments. And for me, that started with, and this is what we do now. So we still have this broad program. We still could do, if we wanted to, thousands of projects and calls, but we're not going to. I can actually call at the moment, count the number of calls that we have on 2 hands, and the number of projects are also below 100 and will stay like that. Why is that? We don't have much less money than before. It's roughly the same. So that is because we decided to have a strategic approach to understand what are the policy gaps for which we have a unique position to address them. And those are typically the ones that are spanning across the existing silos. So when you have to concentrate on narrow objectives, I can tell you that the only thing we do is reinforce existing silos. So these silos already exist. We are very good at that in central government to create silos. So it's probably not a good idea to reinforce that from the European level, because then we will never be able to do anything else than what they are doing anyway already. So what's the point? So I would rather say have a very broad objectives, but insist and have a dialogue about how we are doing a strategic approach to that, which most member states, honestly, with their own funding, are not so good at either anyway. So that could be the real contribution and the special position also of the funds, because they can be so broad. And there is a European level also to take into account, so that you could cut across the existing silos that we are already good at. And what does strategic also mean? Strategic doesn't mean launching something and then waiting and seeing what happens. I've never heard that this is strategic. Strategic is you go out and you mobilize the actors that are relevant. That means you have to, I heard somebody say it, get out get out of the office, I would say. You know, that's a very different mindset. you have to, even those that are reluctant, and pretty much everybody is reluctant for some really strange reasons. Sometimes nobody wants to get together because it's always nicer. Well, just give me some money and I can do whatever I want. But most of these problems cannot go away like that anymore. So we have to put them together. And some of these actors are themselves, not because they're trying to do a bad job, but they are a systemic cause of the problems. So you have to get them in the room and engage them together with other people. And that includes NGOs, the public service itself, and so on. So that this is not just the job to be outsourced to NGOs, for example. We have to take our own responsibility because we are sometimes, with the way that we work, responsible for the problems, or at least for keeping them in place and not really addressing them. So that to me is strategic. It's also getting out there, because what I just said is not easy to actually get impact networks to work. To think that you just put some people in a room and say, here, you get a lot of money, now please be an impact network. Well, I can tell you that doesn't work like that. So we need to put a lot of our own resources, and then I can tell you technical assistance really doesn't cut it, to actually facilitate, coach, stimulate these people, and take our own responsibility also for that. So that's for me really the ingredients of a strategic approach. Now, it doesn't seem to me to be so hard to question member states when they are saying that they are doing strategic things. Are you doing those kinds of things or not? And then it would be a counter-indication if they say, I don't know, I just launched my calls, I put them open, projects come in, we appraise them on paper, whatever, because, paper is paper, I always say. And then, well, our job is just to process the invoices, right, the payment claims. Well, that's not a strategic approach, honestly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Benedict. And cały czas poruszamy się w obszarze tego, jak...
Now we remain in the area of how to find answers to strategic challenges. Moving on to I'm lost again.
Jakie są, z perspektywy Małopolski?
Now, from your point of view in Małopolska, what are new intensifying challenges where ESF would be a response? And perhaps in these challenges, changes to the programming and implementation of the EFS would be required.
Raz, dwa, nie działa.
Działa? Może działa, dziękuję.
Right. Now, I'll probably not be will not be saying anything new, because things have been mentioned before. One thing is the demographic change, which is quite a challenge. It's not new, but is intensifying. Małopolska is an aging community. The number of the population is growing only through migration. For the last 3 years, we are the only Polish region that is something like a policy how to address the migrations. But I'm not 100% sure that we can really manage this, because we are both the country and the region who have or has been quite homogeneous ethnically until very recently. So we don't have the experience of countries such as Belgium or France. We will need to learn very fast. And the demographic change is both in education, because there are less children, which is translating will be into the network of schools and a labor market, where there is less and less new candidates, participants in labor market, young ones. So the question will be how to activize people with that are the most difficult to include and maintain on the labor market. So people with disabilities and old people. Another challenge is the matter of women who are maybe housewives or are staying at home. They abandon their, let's say, they withdraw from the labor market, are occupying themselves with their children, but more and more with senior citizens.
Kwestia imigrantów.
Immigrants or immigration is another thing. It's new. It's also popping up in education, in labor market, and not only about tapping into the potential of these people in basic professions, basic skills, but also those professions that require some sort of certification. So I'm talking about specialists who could join our labor market. Another challenge, also mentioned many times, already. So is new technology and AI. This is something that really is future-oriented, but also could be a threat, because we will have a number of professions and people are practicing these professions who, if they don't upskill, requalify, reskill, they will fall out of the labor market. And the final area is a matter of crisis robustness or resistance. Over the years, we had this sense of security, that wars are a thing of the past. But the situation in the Ukraine has shown us that that the world can change overnight, and I'm not 100% sure that we are ready for other kinds of crises in the future. Will this require a change of approach? Of course. And Piotr Wygnański was saying before, the NGO and the EFS has a broad scope. Is it good? Is it bad? Maybe good. But what is missing to me, looking back many years, is the lack of flexibility, of insufficient flexibility, of the time that is required, that is taken for preparation of programs, how they translate into partnerships. This is much earlier than the time when the funds are spent. So I have a feeling that we are unable to define and address challenges, and so we need to have some sort of flexibility as an inherent part of the ESF, because only this will give us more, let's say, impact. And another thing that we should be addressing, or the decision makers should be addressing, is the non-replicating previous successes in activities, in ESF activities. Pierre was talking about it before. We would like to allow member states to pick and choose arrangement and mechanisms that are useful for particular member states, let alone their regions. I'm thinking about special education, for example. It cannot be supported to the extent that we wanted, but we've heard those arguments that if the Italians have managed the special education system to include to provide this high inclusiveness in. If they did it, you can also do it. Every country has its special situation. Every needs requires maybe a tailored arrangement for it. So we need to remember about it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we heard a lot about the challenges, about some different postulates regarding the future of European Social Fund and how it should be structured. So now the question to you, Adrianna, that I would like, maybe you can refer, to other speakers, but also I would like to ask you about European Social Fund in the next perspective, but from the perspective of long-term planning and reacting to the ongoing crisis. We The current financial perspective shows that European Social Fund can be really important instrument for responding for such events like COVID, like war in Ukraine, but also the long-term planning has its advantages and allowing to have a longer planning perspective. So how to reconcile those two dimensions in the future? For the longer perspective, but also to have the instrument which can react quickly to the emerging situations.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank all the panelists here because they have touched upon so many different elements. Piotr, thank you very much. We've noted very carefully your expectations for the future. Benedict managed to draw the attention of what's the difference between strategic and what we think is strategic. Sometimes it's the case. You are very right, Benedict. And thank you very much for your practical examples about reality and life and the non-governmental sector being part of the implementation of the funds. The regional perspective was also very, very useful. So it's not easy for me to say how we can do the flexibility within a long-term perspective because we had it. I tell you that even the economic crisis in 2008 allowed the 2007-13 programming period to react very quickly, to readjust the operations towards the needs of people at that time. We didn't have major reprogramming exercises then. We think that there is a certain level of inbuilt flexibility in the programs for the ESF, and this is always been our idea. I take note that probably the specific objectives are too many. We are trying every time to reduce them. I'm not finding excuses that they grow in number because this is the negotiations with Council and Parliament, and we end up with a bit more than our initial proposals. But the idea behind these objectives is to be able to identify actions, operations on the ground that bring results which we can put together and report. You see, it's really a bit of a, if we leave a very broad objective, we'll end up with only program-specific indicators which we won't be able even to say what's the impact at EU level of huge spendings. It's not thousands of euros, but billions of euros. So there should be something, and I think at the moment our discussions are not that advanced because the College of Commissioners will have tomorrow an orientation debate on the future MFF. On the 11th of February there will be a communication, the road to the next MFF from the college, and then we'll be putting up the political directions into practical regulations. I think that the idea of having really a strategic approach comes also from the competitiveness compass which was published yesterday, where there is clear identification of which are the key areas, key parameters for action, and there is one of the horizontal enablers for increased competitiveness, which is skills and quality jobs. And I think the European Social Fund, with this only, has a very clear framework. What we need to do. Our first and foremost efforts and direction of action should be about skills, about ensuring we have the good training institutions, we have the good cooperation and exchange and knowledge about the needs of the labor market, the needs of the companies, because they also change and they need new staff with new skills. We need to establish good cooperation with non-governmental organizations for the social inclusion areas, and I really have no words to say how important non-governmental organizations are for the social inclusion measures of the European Social Fund everywhere in Europe. You mentioned about the capacity building support, which indeed their member states have full flexibility to decide how to do it, full flexibility, no prescription, no details. We have an article, but you can fit almost anything, any type of support or any type of project within that article. I know that the thematic concentration is criticized, but the fact is that inevitably we end up with a thematic concentration because the global challenges are similar. Social inclusion has been a challenge for everyone. Politically, there was a request to have at least 25% of the ESF allocated to social inclusion. I don't think that this is an area where any member state will say, we have too much money, because there is a big need. Poverty in Europe has a target of reducing by 15 million people at risk of poverty and social exclusion by 2030. We have managed in 5 years to reduce it by 1 million. So that's an incredible effort to be made there. We're listening a lot now to all ideas and proposals and how you think we should be approaching first the policy and strategic orientation. Then we have dialogues and a lot of feedback we receive from different member states on how they want to see the construction of the funds, cohesion policy in general in the future, what things they prefer not to see anymore, and so on. So we are really listening to expectations. We have our lessons. We do have our lessons from so far implementation of the European Social Fund, but also with the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So we are not just starting from scratch. We'll try to base and use the good of both worlds, because it was mentioned in the plenary session that there are good things, there are not that good things. So let's try to put the good things together for the future. And I think that we have still the importance and the relevance of the European Social Fund for our increasing competitiveness, but also protecting the social model of Europe and increasing the well-being of all Europeans. Social innovation is one of my favorite fields. Benedict, I really appreciate when we have social innovation, and this is very often the testing of policies that could be successful and become mainstream policies. We have such cases. And social innovation is not something that, okay, if it doesn't work, we just say we failed. No, we didn't fail. We tested something, and we know it doesn't work. So that's why we're taking a bigger risk on the EU budget, not leaving to you to take a higher co-financing rate. And I think that social innovation will be useful when it's more and more followed up, taken or examined by others, and scaled up whenever possible. So we will continue with social innovation clearly as a method of implementation of the European Social Fund. Because for me, social innovation is not an objective. It is a method. It's an instrument of how we can do things. And everybody should be innovative every day. That's life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this important intervention. I think it's really important to see the European Social Fund as well-established, in principle, well-functioning instrument, but still looking for things to be improved, you know. So this is why we have this discussion. But
just a second. Life is changing every day. We cannot pretend that since the time we negotiated and agreed the 21-27 rules, the world has not gone upside down. So this is logic, this is normal. And that's why we talk about the inbuilt flexibility to the extent possible that it can reflect new needs and new demands. It's not that, okay, we do something, we adopt it, and then we close it. We have amended, how many times I lost track of the CPR for 2014-2020. Now we started amending the 21-27 ESF and DGF with the restore. So you see, it's we have to react to reality. And that's most important, to be relevant to what is needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chciałbym teraz, mamy jeszcze kilka minut na pytania.
We have a few minutes left for a Q&A session. So, ladies and gentlemen.
Ja może przekażę.
Bardzo dziękuję. Nazywam się...
Thank you very much. Alicja Messerschmidt. I come from Eastern Wielkopolska, another Polish region. We're talking about Małopolska here, where we are, but I come from Wielkopolska, another region. I represent the capital group ZEPAK. I'm the head of the trade union from brown coal mine in that area. A question to Mrs. Sukova. You were saying that employees should be supported in the transition to other jobs. We have a program, a road to employment after coal, because next year we will be completing our excavation or mining of coal, and our program is a social program, but it's not from ESF, but from Just Transition. But just to say, if our employees are also entrepreneurs, we have received 258 million złotych from the government, but we have not been able to tap into it entirely because there are some limitations in terms of fossil fuels. An example, an employee wanted to buy a car platform to spend 100,000 złotych. That's the top limit, the cap, to buy this. But the regional authorities has not been able to, not allowed this, and directed this person to buying a car platform that costs 600,000 złotych, so 6 times the amount that he has, because this new car platform is an electric one. So just something that to draw your attention to. We have the money from the government, and we are not able to spend this money. And we are risking that we will be returning this money to the Commission budget. So their time is running out. We will be laying off these people, and they will not be able to use this money for the program. Thank you. So I'd like to urge you, Madam Director. I spoke with Madam Gellen before, who agreed that if we had any problems, to talk to her. So that's why I'm flagging this problem for us at the Konin coal mine. Thank you very much. My proposal is, because there is not a lot of time, let's collect 2 or 3 questions more, and then we will respond to all of them at the same time. Marek Maślak, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also representing the ZEPA Capital Group, the same group, connecting to what the head of the trade union mentioned. It's the de minimis tax assistance. We are disappearing from the map of Poland next year. You've been talking about social economy, so our employees are establishing social companies with up to 300,000 euros assistance cap. So we'd like to have a change there. We have a social company that could give employment to 20 or 30%, but the cap for the assistance is 300,000 euros. So this is up to 8 jobs. Our employees will be laid off, and by establishing this company, they could continue working. They could continue to find employment in an area which is really which is scarce in jobs, and the town and the area is depopulating. Thank you very much for this question. One more question. Ladies and gentlemen, Krzysztof Kotuniewicz, Polish Association of the Deaf. I'd like to thank you for the debate. There are many interesting matters have been mentioned and declared, but I'd like to point your attention to what Mr. Krasuski was talking about, the transformation that we've gone through, 25 million people who benefit from the funds, and we still have 5 million people with disabilities whose potential can be tapped into, even though some of the actions that are taken are only facade in type. They are not addressing real needs. It's like Mr. Wygnajski was saying, that somebody is taking part in n number of English language courses. Now, limitations are often impacting the weakest. So people who are deaf are often unable to take part in training funded from the European funds, because somebody has forgotten to include this area. We're talking about education and accessibility in all areas of life. And as Madam from Małopolska was saying about special schools. Deaf people require special schools with bilingual education. You cannot have education only in sign language everywhere in Poland. So we need to direct support for the weakest. And another matter, in Poland, we have been using community funds with great solutions, but this has not been translated into legal solutions. Some solutions have been shelved and are not being replicated. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these specific problems. Let's respond to these questions.
You like to react?
I'm not familiar with the cases, unfortunately, but I will ask my colleagues from the Polish desk to check the progress. I know that the Just Transition Fund has 2 components of its budget, and 10 billion should be spent by the end of 26. So this gives the urgency of projects that are covered by the Next Generation EU budget to be quickly spent. And the rest 7.5 billion are coming from the MFF, which is having a longer-term horizon. But I think that there are discussions about, and you see in the competitiveness compass, another assessment of our state aid systems and de minimis and so on, to make it really relevant to the prices, because sometimes, you know, prices of products or any equipment that is needed can go much beyond the de minimis for when it's applicable. So there is a process of checking state aid rules, de minimis, the public procurement and so on, to make sure that the limitations are manageable and not hampering. I think that there is probably a lot of social economy opportunities in all regions. And by the way, you know that now the automotive industry in Europe is threatened by a number of actions, east, west, far east, far west. But the workforce in the automotive industry in Europe is 10 million people, and social economy enterprises in Europe have 11.5 million people. So I think that there is a lot of untapped potential in social economy, where we should also probably provide additional support and help. We also do this with our social economy action plan, providing even financial assistance for startups and microfinance. But just to give you the magnitude of some employment opportunities which are really making an impact, without us having a clear picture how important they can be for giving people employment opportunities, chances, and helping them start their own businesses. I'll see what's the possibility of amending some of the eligibility requirements, for sure. These are adopted by the monitoring committee, and the monitoring committee is chaired by our colleagues, mostly led by our colleagues from the, it's not chaired, it's chaired by the managing authority, but it is DG Regio who is leading on the Just Transition Fund, but our colleagues are also involved in all those social investments that are part of the JTF, so I'll pass your message and your concerns to them. I know that people with disabilities have a lot of problems. I know that Accessibility Act, which was adopted in 2019, in some countries is still not fully applied, fully transposed, and we have infringement procedures with almost quite a number of countries in Europe on that. But it is not about legislation, and it's not about infringements. It is about really allowing full inclusion of our population in society. And I think that sometimes it's a question of instinct to think about it. It's not made on purpose. It's not becoming a necessity, an immediate thought. And that's why we're insisting that in the monitoring committees, we do have representatives of those target groups that are addressed by our interventions, and also those that are part of the implementation equally. It's not that, and sometimes these representatives of non-governmental organizations representing different vulnerable groups, they do bring the necessity and the need and draw the attention to how to prepare operations that they also take into account potential applicability or usability for people with certain types of disabilities. So I think we still owe a lot to people with disabilities in Europe in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Piotr?
Dziękuję. Ja panu Krzysztofowi Kotyniewiczowi.
I would like to reply to Krzysztof Kotyniewicz and thank him for asking the second question. You did speak a lot about the problems and issues that are facing up to people with disabilities. Well, this is the area which demonstrates very clearly that whenever there is good policy and good instruments, then the efficiency of the European Social Fund is also high. We know what's like in Poland, we know the types of incentives, well, I would call them reverse incentives for people with disabilities. Well, those people have to incur a lot of risks, including social risks, when they start the employment. And at the same time, they have to be worried that some benefits will be taken away from them. Well, we need to introduce a number of systemic solutions for that situation to reverse. Now, no matter the amount of training we go for, because the European Social Fund is largely about training, skills, capacity building through various types of incentives, but whatever the amount of training we deliver, we will never be able to make significant change and activate people with disabilities if we fail to reverse that poor situation. Now, as for accessibility for the people with disabilities, or any other reason that makes it difficult and impedes access to projects for various types of groups, then we always need intervention. We always need to react. Very often we hear about it, but not that many signals are sent out to us. We do not get complaints frequently enough. We do not get info at the monitoring committee, or we do not get information that the fundamental rights have been infringed upon. I mean, you have to tell us, complain, write to us, use this official path. Mind you, we have the Article 9 of the regulation on non-discrimination, and then we have the rational facility. It is an obligation of all the beneficiaries to make sure that access is granted. And the obligation of all the institutions that provides funding is to give extra money for the facilities that would make the project accessible. If this is not done, it's an irregularity that may even result in funds being taken away. So complain, write us, inform us. And the last point, now, education in the special care schools. Well, I can only applaud you, and for sure, we will be transferring this file. We want the European Commission to reflect on it once again, whether this ban on providing funds to special schools is really something you want to go ahead with. Because I feel that you are not really paying justice. We are excluding children with disabilities from support that may otherwise have been granted under the European Social Fund. So we are shying away from the group that deserves our support the most. Deinstitutionalization, nice and dandy, but it's about care services, not education. So as we heard from Mr. Kotyniewicz, there are so many children with various types of very grave disabilities that would simply not be able to be part of the general broad education, while so special schools are excluded from the funding. So I think maybe in Italy you do have a long-standing tradition of including children with disabilities into the general education system. But in Poland, we have a different system. So maybe the time has come during the mid-year review to build a compromise, or at least to reflect on it again during the new programming period. Piotr asked me whether the regulation is too broad or too narrow. And I evaded the question because I said it's not about narrow or broad objectives. It's about individual issues such as this exclusion of special care schools. They are simple interpretations, if you like, of the resolution. They do not stem directly from the letter of law written there. So again, I would be asking the European Commission to reflect on it once again. Thank you very much indeed. We only have 5 minutes left, so maybe a last round would be the conclusion of this panel. I would ask one of you to give us a 1 minute, let me repeat, 1 minute roundup of the panel. 2, 3 key things that you are going to take home as a message from this panel, or maybe that you would like the beneficiaries of this panel, the audience, to remember.
Mission impossible. I will keep it very short. I think I heard the word governance fall a couple of times. I think that's an important concept that we miss a little bit in the European Social Fund. We don't talk about it enough, and we don't talk about what it really means. So I heard also something about dropping old Soviet-style methods of planning. It has something to do with that, but it also has to do with understanding differences in types of governance and how they translate into funding mechanisms. There is a place for results-based finance mechanisms. There's a place for other types of financing mechanisms because they derive from different choices in terms of governance, which then again derives from different policy problems that have a different nature and require a different approach. That's something I think, that's worth the debate on its own, probably in a workshop on its own. It resonated here through some of the discussions, but we don't have that debate really, I would say, at the European level when the programs and the regulations are constructed.
Well, very briefly, Adriana said that the world is changing every day and that we need to keep up with it. I'm sure this is something we need to remember about when we think about the new take on the European Social Fund. I remember that 20 years ago, when I first started working at the Polish Managing Authority, namely a Polish ministry, we had a twinning project with Finland and the UK, which was still a member of the EU. And I remember a British official within the UK Department for Work and Pension telling us that every day ESF is a challenge day. That's what he said. So on one hand, every day for the ESF is a challenge, but on the other hand, the times, they are changing so fast, and the world is changing so fast that the new ESF should be so flexible under the new perspective so that we can deliver on these two questions, these two issues. Adriana.
Thank you very much. Continuing only with the quotes, it's not only Lenin, but it's also Jean Monnet who said that nothing is possible without people and nothing is stable without institutions. So clearly the thoughts go all over Europe, but I think indeed that we have a very important role to play. Both those who are programming, both those who are preparing regulations, those who are programming, those who are implementing, whether it's regionally or sectorally, all of us have a very strong responsibility about being adequate to the time. And this is my real plea. Thank you.
Minuta.
I only have 1 minute, I understand. I'm going to use a quote of Mike Tyson. You can have any strategy you may want to until you receive a first blow straight into your nose. That's what Mike Tyson said. And then another quote, I have a dream. Well, I think I will also quote myself, because I remember saying that each municipality should have its own strategy to solve its social problems. Now, this is a quote from my own report, and I'm very saddened to say that we do have strategies for everything, but we are not really enforcing them. Well, in ESF, we know that we must fill in certain documents in order to get the money. I'm not against it. I'm not against the strategy, for sure not, but I'm all for strategic thinking. And in strategic thinking, we sometimes have to let go of certain things that we have planned, but we no longer need. That's why I have a dream, to quote again, whereby we will be able to work in the world that is changing so fast that we have to come up with new ideas. I'm just back from Lower Silesia, which suffered so horribly under the flooding. And they know that they have to redo their thinking and that they have to reflect anew on the way they can use the funds available to them. So we need to have a completely new way of thinking about financial mechanisms. Now, who would have said that the number of suicidal attempts among young people will go up 10 times over the 5-year span? This is the problem we have to deal with. These are wicked problems because we never thought about the fact that we will have to come up with a strategy to deal with suicidal attempts among young people. Just to give you an example. What do we do to fight that? How do we work with foster families, for instance, to quote yet another social problem? We have such a horrible lack of foster families in Poland, and we need to do something, and we need to do it fast. So we have to look at social outcome bonds, for instance, whereby some procedures are released in order for the result to come up faster. I want to deal with that. And then another problem, the problem of people being lonely. In the UK, they have a special department that is dealing with the fact that many people live alone or are lonely. I would like the EU to have a strategy on that, to have a network of think tanks to adopt a strategic approach. And so, of course, we have to have a whole system, but we also need to have a rapid deployment. In military, we know that sometimes we need to act so fast that rapid deployment is a must. And I would like to have this fast path in the EU. And maybe we can have the same solution adopted across the board. Because if you live on a 4th floor with no elevator, it doesn't matter whether you live in Krakow or in Barcelona. The same thing for people being lonely. Whether you're lonely in Poland or in Spain, you still have the same problems to fight. So we need to work on short cycles. Some things happen over a span of a week. I don't know how to do it, but I would really like to have this rapid deployment, and I would like to be part of a work group that would deal with this rapid deployment, if possible.
Okay, I'm the last one to speak. I'm regional, by my job, and I can talk about with the perspective of 20 years using Commission funds. I can say that I deeply believe that the greatest effectiveness is achieved when these funds are spent the closest possible to the place that is needy, and especially that it is at the regional level where we can work out multi-area programs, making sure that the programs are complementary at their, let's say, the documents, but also in the operation. And so I'd like to leave you with this idea that the regions are really doing very well in managing funds and will continue with that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for all the questions from the room. In this panel, we wanted to show that managing ESF is not very easy because it is facing tendencies that are sometimes pulling in opposite directions, and the change and permanence, the competitiveness and the coherence and flying high and meeting implementation problems like the ones addressed by people from Wielkopolska who were talking about this mine. This is really not easy, but the debate that we are having to keep improving the fund, and even if we don't ever achieve perfection, we are working on it. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panelists, the participants, the interpreters, and let me also remind you that those of you who are listening to the interpretation, please put back the receivers to the bucket outside.